Hello everyone and welcome to a new episode of Paleo Myths, the series where we use modern science to test popular portrayals of prehistoric life. And which extinct animal can be more popular than the Tyrannosaurus rex? For over 100 years, this predator has captured and terrified the imaginations of millions around the world. It is the one dinosaur that most people can name before any other. This species is perhaps the most studied non-avian dino so far, with many depictions across popular culture and paleo media alike. Ideas for the Rex come and go, with some sticking maybe more than they should. Tyrannosaurus has so many myths about it, rivaled by only Velociraptor really, that it might be difficult for audiences to separate the fact from the fiction. So that's what we're gonna do today in part 1, because there are too many for a single video. So, what T-Rex myths hold true, and which ones are blatantly false, and what is unknown? Let's dig this up. To start off this batch of Tyrannosaurus myths, it might be useful to know how many types of tyrants stalked the Earth back in the late Cretaceous. For several decades, the number of recognized species within the Tyrannosaurus genus has fluctuated as new discoveries are made around the world. Tyrannosaurus being the generic name, Rex being the species name. Because we usually find scrappy remains, most dinosaur genera only maintain one species. For most of its history, only Tyrannosaurus rex was widely recognized as valid. However, with other very abundantly found critters like Psittacosaurus, one genus may have many species. Then there are all the guys in between. Much debate has been made over what counts as new Tyrannosaurus species, what should be grouped in with T-Rex, and what should be split into its own genus. So let's go through the several proposed species and see how they hold up. It is worth noting that aside from maybe the species level, all levels of scientific classification of organisms are made up. Genus, tribe, subfamily, family, and so on are concepts used to organize the tree of life and give us an understanding of how organisms related to one another. Sometimes I can be a bit anal about classification, like when a documentary uses confusing or incorrect terminology. Well, yes, the relations and ancestries are real, the names we give them are not. On the other side of the globe, in Central Asia, comes two contenders for new members, which may sound a little far-fetched, though really it would make a lot of sense. Several other North American genera have close relatives or even separate species in Asia. We have Saurolophus osborni going goblin mode in the Horseshoe Canyon Formation, and S. angustirostris in the Namek Formation. As the name implies, Sinoceratops was unearthed in China, the Shandong province, yet bears a striking resemblance to many North American centrosaurine ceratopsids. Similar paleofauna of ankylosaurids, dromaeosaurids, ornithomimids, and so on are found on both continents, which implies an interchange of species between them as they cross the Bering Land Bridge. So that sets the stage for one monumental find in 1946 by a Soviet Mongolian expedition in the Gobi Desert that uncovered a very similar skull to the famous North American T-Rex. This first specimen was anointed the title Tyrannosaurus batar, the tyrant lizard hero, by Soviet paleontologist Evgeny Maleev. 3 other specimens were uncovered between 1948 and 49, one of which he named Tarbosaurus ephraimovi. The next 2 he described as Gorgosaurus lancinator and Novodgelovi. I'm doing my best.
Yeah, this is big brain time.
The history of Asian tyrannosaurids seems convoluted now, but in 1965, another Russian scientist,
Анатолий Константинович Рождественский.
Thank you, Google, formally lumped all the smaller eastern Gorgosaurus into Tarbosaurus and lumped that original Mongolian skull, the holotype of Tyrannosaurus batar, into Tarbo as well. Because the specific name batar was erected first, that's the one that sticks, but since it's going into the genus Tarbosaurus, we still keep the generic name. This leaves us with the binomial Tarbosaurus batar, the alarming lizard hero. Despite seeming very similar from a distance, one can distinguish the two not solely on geography, though it helps to know which continent you're on. Tarbosaurus possesses a much thinner skull and proportionally even shorter arms. To sum up this story, the Mongolian Tyrannosaurus batar is no longer recognized, at least by most paleontologists. Some more material out of the Far East comes in the form of isolated tooth fragments and a metatarsal, which have been dubbed Tyrannosaurus juchengensis, after the nearby city of Jucheng, also in the Shandong province. Rather than belonging to the famed genus, this material more likely belongs to the recently described Jucheng Tyrannus magnus, or another currently unnamed tyrannosaur discovered in the same quarry. T. juchengensis? Probably not. I guess if you really wanted to, hypothetically someone could join Tyrannosaurus, Tarbosaurus, and Jucheng tyrannus into one genus. Tyrannosaurus came first, so that would be the preferred name. It would be a natural grouping since they're each other's closest relatives. Yeah, there's no concrete standard for what makes one genus or multiple genre, but these predators are widely regarded as different enough to keep separate, with no real benefit or clarification made by tossing them all together. Since everyone else was doing it, did T-Rex or some ancestral Tyrannosaurus species cross over into Asia to bring us the Asian Tyrannosaurines? Yes and no. Yes to the Tyrannosaurids crossing back and forth, some family members. No to Asian relatives being recognized as Tyrannosaurus. More recently, in 2022, Gregory S. Paul and friends published a study that advocated for the genus to be split into 3 species: T. rex, T. imperator, and T. regina, the king, emperor, and queen. One line of evidence used variation in the classic Tyrannosauroid incisiform teeth. Some fossils showed the first 2 sockets as small, with a bigger third, while others showed only number 1 being small as 2 and 3 grew larger. The second reason was the robustness of their femurs. Some grew to be wider, though others were thinner. With these 2 variables, Paul divided the Tyrannosaurus genus into 3. T. imperator would be the earliest and the largest, with the famed and remarkably complete Sioux specimen as the holotype, since it had the 2 smaller teeth and a robust femur. Then, according to this study, imperator evolved into the robust T-Rex and gracile T. regina, both with only 1 shorter incisiform tooth. While I respect much of Paul's research and paleo art since he was such an instrumental figure during the dinosaur renaissance, and to this day, he does have a reputation of throwing some wild ideas out there. Now, wild new ideas can be great in shaping our understanding of the past, but they need to be backed by some concrete evidence. His 3 species idea is definitely not that.
How embarrassing. How embarrassing.
Experts in the field instantly came out to criticize Paul's paper for a range of reasons. Using dentition and femur width for the basis of new species isn't the best idea since these are already known to be highly variable, even on an individual level. Robustness varies, though is well within the expected range for a single species. Even if the methods for distinguishing species sounded good on paper somehow, in practice, it's proved to be a train wreck since several good specimens of Tyrannosaurus cannot be placed in one or the other. Some others have only been assigned not on their characteristics, but simply by how old they are.
Not a great plan.
Here's a clear example of circular reasoning. He distinguishes taxa based on age, but then assigns some specimens to different taxa solely based on the age. Of the 53 specimens considered by Paul, only 23 were confidently assigned, with 30 of uncertain placement. Let me repeat that. Under Paul's framework, most Tyrannosaur specimens cannot be placed. This is a taxonomic nightmare. I can go on, but you can go read the response paper or watch one of the many videos covering this debacle. T. imperator and T. regina, not a chance. Myself and many others do see a possibility that everything we consider T-Rex may hold distinct species. Speciation occurs in other end Cretaceous fauna. So it's possible the same occurred in Tyrannosaurus. Too bad the evidence for this is not good at all. One last chapter in this myth was dropped at the start of 2024 to settle some controversy on a discovery from 1983 when parts of a right lower jaw and some skull bits were found in New Mexico's Hall Lake Formation. The new material was met with uncertain taxonomic placement as some considered it T-Rex, others a yet unnamed Tyrannosaurus species, and perhaps even a new genus. In 2024, the southern tyrant was named as a second species in the genus, Tyrannosaurus micraensis, due to a shallower, upward curving lower jaw and a less pronounced post-orbital crest. Originally, this new addition was thought to have lived at the end of the Campanian, nearly 73 million years ago, which seemed too early to me, so I expected a revision in the near future. Well, it looks like Christmas came early this year, because in a 2025 paper on the evolution of Daspletosaurus and other Tyrannosaurines, the rock layer where the remains were found had been dated at about 69 million years ago instead.
Nice.
Much more in line with what you'd expect from an early relative of the T-Rex, rather than having an awkward period of Tyrannosaurs roaming the continent, leaving almost no trace, silently plotting the downfall of Albertosaurus. As of the time I'm writing this in the February of 2025, we have 2 confirmed, uncontroversial species of Tyrannosaurus, though who knows what the future holds for Micraensis. Time and time again in paleo media, especially during the 90s and 2000s, us audiences saw some clear sexual dimorphism in depictions of theropods or the generally bipedal meat-eating dinosaurs. It was commonly shown in Tyrannosaurus along with some others that the females would grow to be noticeably larger than their male counterparts and consequently bully them around. Now we have the myth of the Queen Rex. Were the girls queens, or did they make their money on OnlyStans? This idea didn't come out of thin air from some highly speculative paleo media or from the Hear Me Roar crowd. In this time period, proponents such as Dr. Kenneth Carpenter pushed the idea of 2 distinct morphs of adult tyrants. We had the robust morph, interpreted as female, along with the gracile morph, which would be male. The females were thought to have a wider pelvis and a reduced first caudal chevron, which would allow more space to dump out some eggs, similar to modern crocodilians, the closest living relatives of the dinosaurs. Though in these modern relatives, it is the males who are significantly larger. A good example of this chevron dimorphism comes once again from the Field Museum's Sioux specimen, confirming the connection between being large and being female. It's here where the myth starts to fall apart. A future study in 2008 showed that, yeah, there's no sexual dimorphism in crocodilian caudal chevrons. Only a few specimens studied have a reduced first chevron, but this condition is not specific to either sex, so that method isn't reliable. Paleontologists cannot confirm if bulkier specimens such as Sioux are female. It's equally possible that this find represents a male.
Nice, clean. It's back to the drawing board.
Well, that's great. I don't know how to draw, so you're gonna have to do the drawing.
To be honest, there's very little information out there on sexual dimorphism in the vast majority of non-avian dinosaurs. For the birds, yeah, we often see a clear distinction, with males being more vibrant and flashy. Since we can't observe skin or feather color in most species so far, that's difficult to prove, though it provides some fun yet plausible speculation. But when it comes to the size and gender of a dinosaur, well, we often don't know. For one thing, paleontologists 99% of the time can't tell whether they're looking at a male or female because there are no clear osteological correlates or clues on the skeletons. So even if we do see different sizes for specimens of the same species, we can't match a size to a sex. So many other variables can be at play, whether it be individual variation, regional differences, changes in a species over time, or just plain maturity. It can also be all or some combination of these. In the fossil record, there are a handful of cases where we can tell. One instance does exist for Tyrannosaurus in the specimen known as the B-Rex. Doctors Mary Higby Schweitzer and Lindsay Zano found the B-Rex to have possessed medullary tissue, a layer of bone found in birds and other dinosaurs who are pregnant or in the process of egg laying, confirming this individual to be a female. Alright guys, pack it up. We have a sample of 1. Out of dozens of T-Rex specimens, we can confirm the sex of 1. Our expecting Rex wasn't even a particularly large one. While I can't find the exact size estimate, she's described as a young adult of 16 to 20 years old when she died, not quite the giant this myth needs. At the moment, there's no evidence to support the Queen Rex myth, so I think it should go back to formula.
Back to formula.
I actually got the idea for this video when playing the History Channel trivia game, and one of their questions was on the closest living relative of the famous T-Rex. Of course, I knew the answer would be a chicken because this so-called link is one you hear about over and over.
Shut up! Just shut up, you idiot!
Considering the History Channel's track record with dinosaurs, I should have expected as much. At least the public is starting to associate non-avian dinosaurs with birds now, so there's a plus. Unfortunately for the myth, Tyrannosaurus rex is not a direct ancestor of the chicken, and these walking nuggets are not their closest living relative, at least not exactly. For that first part, T-Rex has no living descendants, since, as we should know by this point, they all died out. Not a single individual survived the KPG extinction event when a meteor slammed into the Yucatan Peninsula about 66 million years ago. All the dinosaurs that weren't birds met a tragic end in that event. Since all Rexes died, no one had any descendants.
That idea is just the worst.
So even if there isn't a direct lineage, are chickens the closest thing we have to the tyrant lizard king? Not quite. Yes, but actually no. It's complicated, but to explain why, we gotta talk about phylogeny, the study of the evolutionary tree and relationships between organisms. All birds belong to the class known as aves. All members of aves, or avians, or birds, whatever you want to call them, are descendants of a single common bird ancestor, making this a monophyletic grouping. We're not just tossing random animals in here. Aves contains all birds and their closest ancestor, so all birds are more closely related to each other than to anything outside of this class, like a velociraptor, an ornithomimouse, or Tyrannosaurus. The first bird was a theropod dinosaur belonging to the advanced group called Coelurosauria. This means all birds today are Coelurosaur theropod dinosaurs, because no matter how far you branch off, no matter how bizarre you become, you can never evolve outside of a group or clade. What also are Coelurosaur theropods are the Tyrannosaurids, including Tyrannosaurus itself, of course. But really, that's the last connection they had. The last common ancestor was some early Coelurosaur. Not to go too long on this, because phylogeny is fascinating, our favorite macro predator is equally related to all birds, because all birds came from a single ancestor that is, somewhat related. I can't say that the Rex is closer to a chicken, or an eagle, or a duck, since their path with T-Rex broke away at the same point. Sure, the chicken is the closest modern relative, but equally, so are all other birds. So this myth needs to take its whole line back to formula.
Back to formula.
If you've been following my channel for any length of time, you should know that I'm a huge Jurassic Park fan. Spielberg's 1993 classic is among my favorite movies. One of the many iconic scenes from this film is the breakout scene with the T-Rex, in which our protagonist, Dr. Alan Grant, survives due to his expertise on theropod dinosaurs, knowing that it can only visualize prey that is moving. For the record, this is not due to frog DNA. since too many times fans try to hand wave away any scientific inaccuracies with the frog excuse rather than accepting the simple fact that dinosaurs in the Jurassic universe are different from dinosaurs in real life. Dr. Grant knew this fun fact about the Rex even before setting foot on Isla Nublar. But what if someone in real life is miraculously able to bring this animal back? Would you be safe if you stood still? From what I can find, the Jurassic Park franchise is where the myth originated and was only added for some flavor or spectacle. Sure, vision based on movement made for a suspenseful scene. It was great, but with no basis in actual paleontology. The whole thing was just made up. In reality, the top predator had top-notch vision. According to PhD student Abby Crane of Southampton University, the eyes of Tyrannosaurus were the size of a grapefruit and would have, and I quote, distinguished objects with up to 5 times more precision than those of a falcon and 13 times better than a human. Additionally, looking at the skull shape of this predator points to powerful binocular vision. With eyes raised high above the snout and pointing forwards, much more so than other theropods, it had a greater degree of binocular vision than hawks at 55 degrees, as well as a high level of depth perception to beware of incoming ankylosaur clubs or bites from rivals, according to expert Kent A. Stevens. With eyesight better than modern birds of prey, T-Rex is a contender for some of the best eyes in the fossil record. So yeah, if you run into one in the wild, standing still just makes you an easy snack.
That idea is just the worst.
To close out part 1 of these many Rex myths, let's analyze one of its most iconic features, those puny arms. Ever since it became known to science, the tyrant's arms have been the subject of endless speculation and endless ridicule.
Razor sharp vision and 2 tiny little arms. He...
Here, please hit me as hard as you can.
The Gorgosaurus had a large brain. I'm sorry, I can't take him seriously with those tiny little baby hands.
Don't hold back.
Many other theropods maintain longer, more flexible arms tipped in 3 claws rather than 2, perfect for seizing prey. As for these little things, who knows? Were they too small to function? Did these reduced forelimbs serve any purpose? When Barnum Brown found the Tyrannosaurus rex holotype, now CM9880, it was missing most of its arms, though a short humorist did clue researchers in on what was next. 1914 saw the description of the Tyrannosaurid Gorgosaurus, complete with short, 2-fingered forelimbs. For most of the 20th century, until 1989, the last good Tay-Tay album, no Rex arms had ever been uncovered. Instead, we relied on inferences from close relatives to fill in the gaps, which worked well in this case. I should be clear though, these were far from the only theropods with reduced limbs. Actually, it's pretty common for apex predator dinos to lose their long arms in exchange for bigger heads. We see the same occurrence in Carcharodontosaurids and especially Abelisaurids. Cretaceous hunters made do without. Some experts argue how this is a trade-off made for the animal to maintain its balance. As their heads grew bigger, the arms reduced so as not to be too front-heavy. Others posit that we see this trend because with the greater sized head, they needed more muscle mass for the neck to carry that thing around. Shrinking the arms then provided more space for those neck muscles. I've also seen hypotheses that limb reduction may have been selected for to avoid injuries during intraspecific combat. Another Rex can't bite your arm off if you have smaller arms. All of these can be true, or maybe different reasons for different lineages. We have various reasons for why the arms may have been shrunk, but since they're in this position, did they still serve a purpose, or are these vestigial leftovers from a bygone era? Our fan-favorite dino received its description from a man who is not as well received, the wildly racist Dr. Henry Fairfield Osborn, who co-founded the American Eugenics Society and authored segments of Hitler's Eugenics Bible.
And also, what the heck, dude?
But hey, he named some cool dinos, so maybe God will give him a pool noodle before tossing him into the lake of fire. Anyway, even at the inception of Tyrannosaurus rex and its comical appendages, Osborn remarked how it would be used for loving. Such a massive hunter was still an animal after all, they still needed to mate, so the idea goes that the males would latch onto females with those arms while getting down. Decades later, once paleontologists found a pair, further study refuted the myth of them being vestigial leftovers from henchier ancestors. Rather, these were still fully functional, serving some sort of purpose. Although short in length, they're still thick and would have bore strong muscles when the animal was alive. Kenneth Carpenter and Matt Smith published in 2001 that the Rex's biceps were 3.5 times stronger than a human's, capable of curling 439 pounds even without help from other muscle groups. Carpenter and Smith then argued how T-Rex utilized its arms in prey capture, holding down the struggling meal while the heavy jaws did the dirty work. One other line of thinking, from Dr. Stephen M. Stanley, states that their claws were used for slashing at prey, though this may be difficult with the smaller size and limited range of motion. Also, I'm not sure why this predator would need to get in close with those arms when they're already equipped with a giant head and the most powerful bite force of any terrestrial animal ever. That's like swinging your pickaxe while carrying a gold tack. No explanation really wows me as the most obvious use. Often such radical changes aren't selected for a single reason, unless it's display, so perhaps they were useful in some combination of these, or others I haven't discussed here. Although reduced, the thick bones and strong muscles still tell me these forelimbs were good for something, unlike, say, those in Carnotaurus that could only be wiggled around. Overall, I'm in between an Otis, perhaps, and agreeing with Dr. Strom to take this back to formula, but I'm leaning more towards
Back to formula.
Well, those are 5 myths about the Tyrant Lizard King, largely debunked. Apparently, much of what the public thinks they understand about this creature is either nonsense or not well supported by available evidence. We saw a lot of Willem Dafoe today, which is never a bad thing, honestly. Because there are so many myths surrounding the Rex, we're only halfway there. We're looking good now, and nothing's gonna get in the way. In the next episode, we'll cover a new batch of myths, including a return to the famous scavenger hypothesis. Then, my last major video before retirement will evaluate whether or not Nanotyrannus was simply a juvenile T-Rex. If there are any other tyrant myths you want me to tackle, please leave them in the comments below, so maybe we can make this a 4-parter. And remember, if you enjoyed this video, to please leave a like, subscribe, and to check out my social media. See you next time.